Hi, everybody. I am relatively new to WIP. I've only been here since February. I used to be the Senior VP of Research for the West Coast at CBS, so I'm pretty familiar with content analytics. And before that, I was at Paramount Research, working very hard to support sales there on licensing Paramount programming. So I'm certainly well-versed in all things, or at least several things about licensing. So let's jump in. Today, I'm going to sort of complement, if any of you saw Carol Hanley's talk, this is intended to complement some of the themes she hit upon about the global content licensing environment right now. I think we would all agree that streaming video is, at least for me, the most transformative phenomenon in recent years in the media world. A byproduct of that is that it has enabled content to travel and succeed beyond the borders within which it was created. And here at WIP, we have data that will help describe that, quantify it, and ultimately help you make better decisions, whether you're a buyer or a seller, whatever part of that equation you're a part of. Our data can help you. And I want to help illustrate what's going on with this. First, a little bit more about us. We're actually a conglomerate of three distinct companies. MediaMorph is a content value management software platform. It tracks content, manages all the ramifications of licensing content you can think of, all the financial processes that surround that. We're used by all the major studios and most of the major platforms around the world. Feeding data into that is TVDB. It's a crowdsourced platform with metadata on over 5 million titles. That also helps inform the information at TV Time. This is our consumer-facing app that Carol touched upon in her talk, and a lot of the data that I'm going to describe today comes out of TV Time. It's got 18 million users around the world. We're all over the place, and people tell us all about content that they consume. A little bit more about TV Time. This is a free app. You can download it right now. Consumers download this to their phones, and what they get from it is an ability to learn about the shows that they are interested in watching. As I'm sure many of you have experienced, sometimes you hear about a title, it's hard to figure out where it's going to be. You're not sure what platform it's on. This can help you with that. In return, these people are super fans. They find their show, they watch their show, and then they use the app to tell us how they felt about the show, what emotionally they were experienced during the show. They might rate the talent, they rate the program itself. They can do it episode by episode. They keep track of what they've watched. There's a social element to this. They can put comments about the show, they can post memes, etc. It's over 20 billion insights that we've gathered over the lifetime of this particular app. Again, over 5 million titles, 18 million users all over the globe. So getting into the theme of what we're talking about here, it used to be that US programming was exported to the world, and we didn't see a lot of it coming back to our shores. Now that is changing. We are seeing a lot more content here in the US, and frankly, it's going across borders in the rest of the world as well. And obviously, it's SVODs that are powering this phenomenon. To it. I won't read every detail on this page, but you can see Netflix, for their new production, 38% is going to be on non-English language content. They're doubling their investment in it. Disney Plus developing 24% of their new content is going to be non-English. Prime Video has already been doubling its production of local language content in wherever countries they've been in for the last 3-4 years. HBO Max, the relative newcomer, as is Apple TV Plus, available all over the world, looking to expand, developing local language programming for those platforms. We point to a quote here from Ted Sarandos, the co-CEO and chief content officer at Netflix. The more authentically local shows are, the more likely they are to play around the world. Sounds a little counterintuitive, but it goes to the point that when you use local crews, local language, local environment, local actors, local writers, the show has a certain authenticity that plays everywhere. As soon as you start to manufacture a sort of multicultural thing around a show that doesn't quite fit, that doesn't feel authentic, it's not going to play as well. So getting locally produced content can be a very valuable investment. Let's look at the US here for a sec. This is coming out of the TV Time app. This is the share of foreign titles viewed in the US over the last 3-4 years. This is from 2018 to the current year in 2021. And that share of titles has increased, it's doubled. It's gone from a little under 8% now to over 16%. So foreign programming in the US is definitely catching on. US audiences are becoming accustomed to it and liking it. To it. Netflix, this is a look at just the top 50 shows in the US on Netflix over the last 3 years. And if you eliminate the US shows and just see what's going on in the top 50 from foreign countries, that total has been increasing. In 2018-19, this goes July to July, there were only 2 non-US shows in Netflix's top 20 in our TV Time data. The following year, it doubled, and then this year, it doubled again. And I'll point out to you, it's not just an increase in the amount of shows. You know, we're used to in the United States seeing UK shows, right? We may not watch, they may not have huge audiences, although, you know, occasionally a Downton Abbey breaks through. But for the most part, you flip on PBS in prime time, you might see something with a British accent, or some of their formats translate here, right? Dancing with the Stars, you can go all the way back to the 70s. Sanford and Son was originally Steptoe and Son. But usually, but we don't see things from other places. Look at the diversity of the countries here. You see Denmark, Spain, Germany, Mexico. It's not just UK stuff. It's France, Lupin, which we're going to talk about in a little more detail. A lot of different countries are now represented here. Different platform, Amazon, different country, France. Here I eliminated US titles and obviously the indigenous French shows to show what's going on with shows coming from outside France's borders. And they start from a higher place here 3 years ago or 2 years ago. But again, the trend is the same. There is an increase going from 6 to 10 in their top 50. And again, pretty good diversity of countries represented, not just in Europe, but you know, you would expect to maybe see a German show or a Spanish show, and they are on this list. But India is represented, Latin American countries, Mexico, Chile, and of course, Japan. I assume these are probably anime titles. So again, diversity and increasing amounts. So I mentioned Lupin. Let's talk a little bit about this. This show has been a phenomenon for Netflix. What you're looking at here is, again, TV Time data. These are followers. Followers are people who are not necessarily watching the show yet. They're telling us on the app, you know, I'm interested in this title. Tell me more about it. Tell me when the episodes drop, anything like that. And this enables us to get a sense of what's going on with the appeal of that show pre-release or pre-launch. That's why you see negative numbers there at the bottom of this chart. Those are the amount of days before the release of the program, and the positives are after 0 is the day of the release. What you're looking at here is a bunch of titles from Europe, Middle East, Africa that were originated in those countries. It was the top 10 that debuted over the last several years, and how they performed in a list of countries that you see at the bottom of the slide: the US, UK, Italy, Germany, etc. Several different countries here, including some here in the Americas. What you don't see is France, because we wanted to show how Lupin is really taking off in these countries. So we didn't want to, for lack of a better word, pollute the data with France, because that's its native country. But you can see how the following count took off huge in these countries for Lupin. Lupin is shot in French, although I believe it's dubbed here in English. It's French actors, French crew, French production company. All the locales are in France, and yet the show takes off in all of these countries. So that highlights what's going on with Lupin, but I don't want to ignore what's going on with some of these other shows, because even though their home countries are represented in the list below, it is still significant that some of these are really taking off. For example, the pink line is Sex Education, which is a UK show. And even though UK is represented in that line, there are a bunch of other countries that are not on that are also in the line where it's also doing extremely well, and that's why it is so high there. You could say the same about Dark, which is the blue line, which is a German show, and Elite, which is a Spanish show, that's the purple line, all doing extremely well. And yes, I know they're in that list, but still, look at how high those followers are. People are interested in these shows, even though they're not in their home country. Returning to Lupin, this was its debut weekend in several key European markets, and it's at the top of the charts in all 5 of these, literally in France and Italy, and pretty close, Spain, Germany, and UK. I want to show you another example, didn't just want to keep it at Lupin. This is Sky Rojo. This is a Spanish show. This is from the guys who did Money Heist. You may know it as La Casa de Papel. This was their follow-up. That was a huge hit for them. They came back with Sky Rojo. And again, you would expect it would do well in Spain, but according to our TV Time users, they're also watching it in Italy, Germany, France. The show is traveling very, very well outside its home territory. So why is this happening now? Well, I think the obvious answer, and it's been discussed by a lot, is yeah, it's the proliferation of SVOD platforms, no doubt about it, and then accelerated by a global pandemic when everybody's inside and there's a great demand for new content. But I think there's a nuance to this that's often overlooked and missed. It is the change in the character of gatekeeping. It used to be, 10, 15 years ago, that if you were a producer and you had to get a show on, you wanted to get a show on the air, you had to go to a broadcast, you had to go to a linear network, most likely a broadcaster, although there was some cable, but most likely a broadcaster, and hope that they would grant you access to their network. But that was only half the issue. Now you're on the network. Now you have to compete for, are you going to get the right scheduled spot, right? Are you going to get the real estate on that schedule that's going to get you sampled? Are you going to have a big lead in, or are you going to have one that's incompatible or at least weak? Are you going to be against a big show, or are you going to be against some softer competition where you might have a chance? So that's part of the gatekeeping decision. Another part of the gatekeeping decision was the promotion, another scarce resource. Real estate on the schedule is a scarce resource. So is promotional dollars, or whatever the currency is, or the gross rating points, however you want to measure it. It was another thing that you had to hope the gatekeeper, the network, would allow you access to get you success. That's really not the case anymore with these SVODs. First of all, it's VOD. There's no schedule. It's whenever the consumer wants to dial you up. So that's number one. And then as far as promotion is concerned, yes, I know, I think Amazon does some promotion for some of its shows. So does Disney Plus. I've seen some promotion from Apple TV, but it's not as heavy as what I see from the linear networks. And Netflix, I don't think does, very rarely do they do any promotion for these shows. These services mostly rely on their artificially intelligent suggestion engines to do the heavy lifting, which for the most part eliminates competing for a scarce resource like a promotional dollar, or obviously for real estate on a schedule. So it's a real change here, not just in like, well, there's a lot of these services and they need to satisfy all this demand. It's the way they service that demand. They can, and that it doesn't require the additional cost or competition with other people. It's just their suggestion engine making sure that the right viewer sees your message whenever they're watching something that is somewhat similar to a program that you are putting on the platform. It's a game changer. The gatekeeping is completely different. To illustrate this point, excuse me, I want to look at The Serpent. This is a UK show. It was on the BBC and its sister streaming player, BBC iPlayer, and it was a big hit there. And Netflix picked it up and it put it on its global platform. What you're looking at here is CVMI data, that's our TV Time user data, for how it performed worldwide as well as in the US. The blue bar is the performance of The Serpent on these various metrics. The red bar is the norm within that genre. I'll give you a quick description about what each of these things are, so it gives you a better sense of what a hit looks like in our data. So at the far left in both charts, completion rate, it's just a percent of the available episodes that were viewed among show watchers, right? So for example, in the worldwide situation for The Serpent, the average viewer watched almost all the episodes. It looks like it's about 80-90%, which is higher than what the normal genre, how the normal show would perform in this genre, which is going to be around 70%, right? We have the engagement score. This is a little harder to explain, but it's a reflection of how much activity a TV Time user does on the app regarding the show. So if they are just rating the show or rating a character, that's a certain level of engagement. If they are posting comments and memes, that's a higher level of engagement. We have an algorithm that puts all this together and creates a score. And you can see that for the Serpent, that score is twice as high as the norm would be for this particular genre worldwide, and it's a little higher for the US. Binge rate, we define a binge as watching 4 or more episodes within 24 hours. And this is a reflection of how many viewers do that. Again, this does get binged at a higher rate worldwide than most shows in the genre. In the US, it was about even. And then finally, we have the conversion rate. These are those followers, like I showed you on that Lupin slide. They know about the show. Do they convert? Do they actually become viewers? Well, in the case of the Serpent, they certainly do at a much higher rate in both the US and worldwide than the average show in this genre. So the Serpent worldwide, very successful in the US on these metrics. Why? Here's why. In the UK, where the Serpent appeared on a broadcast network, it was promoted, and people found out. We did a survey, by the way. That's how we got this data, I should say. This was primary research. We sampled Serpent viewers in the UK and the US. And in the UK, about half of them got their information about the Serpent either from word of mouth or an ad, which is often the way a broadcast show, is promoted and sampled. Notice the yellow bar in the US for the streaming recommendation, far and above everything else on the page. That's the power of the Netflix suggestion engine. Netflix doesn't need to promote. They don't need to put a lot of dollars or a lot of GRPs into promoting the show to make it a hit. The suggestion engine took care of it. So one of the reasons these shows are getting sampled in the US now is these suggestion engines are putting these suggestions in front of the right people, and they're more willing to sample as a result. Finally, I want to give you one more example. This is anime. If there's a genre that appears that is so native and identified with one part of the world, it's anime, right? Anime came out of Japan, and as a genre, it is taking off across the world. The global anime market right now is valued as of last year at a little over $24 billion. It's estimated to almost double in 6 years. The movie Demon Slayer was the #1 global release in 2020. It generated over $475 million worldwide. In a COVID-affected year, it generated $475 million. It was Japan's biggest box office hit. I think it's the first time in history a US movie was not the #1 global hit. So anime is taking over the world. We're certainly seeing this in our own data. This is global data from our TV Time users. And whether you measure it in terms of the amount of folks who are viewing it or the share of views going to a program, either way, you can see that anime is growing in popularity with our users. So who's watching it or where are they watching it? Well, again, it's most of the world. The map shows you if a country is in blue, that means it's above average in terms of the viewing to this particular program. This is about One Piece, which is a popular anime program. I've seen this data. I can tell you we could have done this very similarly with a bunch of different shows. But what's interesting about anime in general is look where the darkest blue is. It's in the Middle East. This particular genre is very hot in the Middle East. It's also doing well in North Africa and even in Europe, particularly in France. I believe France does have a sizable Arab population that might have something to do with it. But all over the world, anime is traveling very, very well. One other point about anime, the big boys are noticing. Netflix saw whatever source of data they had. They saw this happening. And they've already commissioned 16 projects from a team in Tokyo to develop these things locally, and then they can put it on their platform. And they're worldwide, so they know that a locally produced anime is going to travel great, and they're going to have terrific success with it. So I'll wrap it up here and just point out that global demand is certainly increasing for programming, regardless of where it is developed. And demand is now diverse. People are more willing to experiment because of these SVODs and because of the way the SVODs make the programming available to them and, frankly, promote the programming to them. But stories are stories. That's what this quote from Ayelet Zurer, who's an Israeli actress, she's making the point there that regardless of where you come from, the stories are the stories. We're all humans. And, as long as everything's authentic, it's going to play. So Netflix and the other SVODs have shown us that programming can travel. It's particularly gaining traction here in the US. Audiences are accustomed now to sampling this, which even if you're not an SVOD, I know I've talked a lot about how they're getting the programming out to their viewers, but you can also reason that they're priming the pump now. And it may not just be limited to them. If you're a linear network, this is certainly a way to diversify your programming, because the SVODs have now made it a little easier for Americans to want to experiment and go and watch this stuff. And I would imagine the same may be true in other territories. But look, whether you're a local platform or a studio, it's obvious this phenomenon is working. And whether you're a buyer or a seller, getting beyond your borders for material is sound business. And WIP Media can help you do it, because we have the data that informs these decisions and can help you find the right content for you, or if you're a seller, the right platform. And with that, I will conclude.